Hello, YouTubers. This is Gold Standard 924 coming at you with another video. Gonna be continuing my TV's Forgotten Gems for today. And unlike the previous TV's Forgotten Gems installments I've done, which emphasized on sci-fis and dramas and sitcoms, this is gonna be me discussing about a particular wrestling promotion that aired on MTV around the spring of 2007. Now, the show only lasted about 10 episodes, and the show that I'll be discussing for is entitled Wrestling Society X. So, WSX, as it's abbreviated, encompasses on a lot of the hardcore slash fast paced in ring action that goes on. And it was kind of perceived as, an independent wrestling promotion. So, the pilot episode actually premiered around January 2007, but it was taped 2 months prior back in November. And it premiered around like Tuesdays at 10:30, which was during like the second half of the rebooted ECW on Sci-Fi. So those shows had to compete with one another, and unlike many wrestling shows, this was only like 30 minutes if you count like the commercials. So there was very little time you could do, and you had to squeeze in a lot of in-ring matches back and forth. So it was kind of rough to kind of not a lot of matches were given that much time. But they did kind of make the best of it by, inserting a lot of video packages, including promos and vignettes, discussing about the wrestlers and some of the accomplishments that they did. And then they have like the WSX title, which was the only title that they ever had throughout its existence. Um, and they brought in like a lot of the wrestlers around the world, including like a couple of familiar faces like X-Pac, Just Incredible, and Vampiro. And they actually brought in a lot of the independent wrestlers as well, with guys like Matt Sydal, Teddy Hart, Jack Evans, and also Cole Cabana, who was called Matt Classic in this TV show. So you know, W Wrestling Society X, just had a all around roster and with wrestlers that actually had a lot of experience, as opposed to like just wrestlers that were just brought in, made exclusively to the show, and and they basically brought in like a lot of those wrestlers, and it was really one of those big opportunities for a lot of the independent wrestlers that were getting ready to get exposed on TV. They weren't given a lot of time to get exposed, and so the show only lasted about 10 episodes, and out of all those 10 episodes, only 9 of them were shown. And there was one episode that was banned from MTV, and it was during the fourth episode. And what happened was at the end of the fourth episode, there was like a little segment where a debuting Ricky Banderas came in and threw a fireball on Vampiro's face. And MTV thought it was just very controversial, so they had to skip through that episode. Now you could actually see that episode on DVD, so so you could actually watch the fourth episode on there. So, but MTV wouldn't show it, and and the edit they did actually made an edit on that, and I'm not gonna spoil how bad the editing was, but for those that are interested, you could watch it on here or get the DVD to watch it. But I could assure you that the editing was just something that it speaks for itself. Um, Now, personally, in my opinion, as far as Wrestling Society X is concerned, it did have a very interesting concept, but the execution of it just really fell flat. Um, but before I get to the cons, I will say the pros. Um, you know, I did mention about how they managed to bring in a lot of established wrestlers from different other wrestling organizations, and also have very solid in-ring action. It's not as much of a snooze fest, but the in-ring action can be pretty rushed at times because you only have a little amount of time to actually perform in the ring. And I do like the very short, simple promos that they do that talks about the people that they're feuding, and just really showing a bit of character kind of a bit of a basic analysis on certain characters as far as some of the wrestlers in the ring goes. It's not like drawn out soap opera that you see in like WWE and TNA. So I do like the very short, straight to the point promos that they do. So that's a plus there. Now the only disadvantage that I want to really discuss, and there's really a lot of disadvantages. Um, Now the show obviously had pretty poor production value, which is kind of to be expected, especially for a show that acknowledges the fact that they are like this underground wrestling organization. But if we go a little deep into that range, with the commentators and the ring announcers, I mean, they tend to really overhype a lot of the matches that are yet to come. Especially, I want to really talk about is the ring announcers. So he's basically there's like this common gag that the ring announcer is always like running around the ring. He sounds like he just sounds very too overexcited. It's almost seemed like he consumed like so much caffeine. Um, Now I can understand that he's trying to hype up the crowd and everything, and that's totally fine. But the ring announcer tends to overdo it in a way, and this gag that I'm talking about is the one where like he's always where like the pyros from the ring posts erupt, and like the cameras, there's like always a shaky cam going on. Um, and even when the ring announcer, another moment was whenever he was announcing the human tornado. He was just spinning around like an actual tornado whenever the actual wrestler comes out, and that got pretty annoying. I mean, it was just unintentional hilarious there. But I mean, the ring announcer kind of tends to overdo it as well. Um, and the commentators, I mean, were just kind of the same thing, very overhyped. I mean, people shit on like TNA commentators and even today's WWE commentators, but if you think they're the worst commentators in professional wrestling, I suggest you watch this. I mean, it was just that bad. Um, and then they also brought in a lot of music artists to guest star in each episode. Most notably in the pilot episode, the metal rock group Black Label Society was on there. You also had 3 6 Mafia and Good Charlotte, and just basically music artists that were relevant at the time. But you don't really see them do like guest performances. Like I said, time constraints. I mean, it was only 30 minutes. Um, so they were pretty much on the commentary booth just discussing about the matches and some of the wrestlers that were competing. Um, so that's pretty much the main thing that they do. So you don't expect any music performances. Um, and another thing, it was just the overuse of pyros and other special effects. Now I discussed a little bit about it with the ring announcer and the fact that there was always this gag that that whenever that they're starting up the show, it's like the pyros explode and there's always these unnecessary shaky cam. But what I want to talk about a little bit more was, as far as overusing of pyros go, there was a moment where during a match between Vampiro and Six, and it was supposed to crown the first WXX champion. So what happened was Vampiro did like a tombstone pile driver on the coffin, and the moment that happened, the pyros erupted. There was like this big explosion going on, and announcers, just going, "Holy, what the hell's going on here?" And and they really overdid this in pretty much every episode. It was just way too over the top. And this is actually a common, also another gag that goes on every episode. It's like there's always some sort of explosion, a lot of explosives that go on in some form or another. Um, and I did kind of discuss also about Vampiro, the fireball incident. And then like they had like the last episode with the exploding time bomb. Uh, I mean, come on, even like I don't even remember another company doing this. I mean, just a lot of unnecessary explosions. I mean, it almost seems like some sort of something that came out of a cartoon. But but just the overall production value just really kind of told me as a viewer that the show wasn't going to even last that long. Um, and to top it all off, all the matches that occurred in WSX were all no disqualification, and that kind of really ruins the prestige and the purpose of the hardcore matches. As far as like hardcore matches, they should be reserved for a feud that's gonna kind of basically what I'm saying is that when it comes to no DQ matches, they're kind of used to kind of wrap up wrestling feuds, but they basically kind of overdid this also, and just having every match be no DQ was just kind of really ruins the prestige of it. Um, so I mean, overall, I mean, Wrestling Society X just a very interesting concept, very poor execution. With a lot of too many explosives, a lot of over the top action. Um, but they did have a very well-rounded roster. With wrestlers from all around the world. Whether it's mainstream, independent companies. And some of the wrestlers from Japan. Um, but other than that, it was just another wrestling promotion that sort of came and went. Um, so I mean, they were gonna bring in also other titles as well when they were gonna plan a second season. They were supposed to like bring in like the tag team titles that they had. So they really exposed a lot. They kind of emphasized more on the tag team division a little more than the world title segments, and they didn't think about bringing the tag team titles until towards the end of the series. But by that point, the show had already been canceled. It wasn't drawing as much ratings as MTV hoped. Um, so ever since then, I believe MTV hasn't really shown any wrestling, unless you want to count the Lucha Libre USA on MTV2. But um, I guess that sort of counts, but not really because it was on another channel. But overall, Wrestling Society X was just a really lackluster show. So that's basically it for this video. And till next time, this is Gold Standard Caesar 924 signing out.